Welcome. Glad to have you guys with us today. So this is our bi-weekly estate planning mastermind, just an opportunity for those of us in the estate planning world to get together and sometimes we talk shop, sometimes we have presentations. We're really lucky today to have a couple of really impressive folks with us. We've got Brittany from Gavel. Gavel is a document automation software that we'll talk more about. And then we've also got Wouter from DecisionVault. I hope I pronounced that right. From DecisionVault, I don't know how many of you guys are using DecisionVault. I do in my practice. It is a client intake system for estate planning attorneys. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong about her, but your wife is an estate planning attorney, I think. So to me, what's been great about DecisionVault is that because Wouter has that inside track on what we're actually doing in our offices, the software is built towards the way that we practice law instead of us having to adapt to the software. And so that's been a really refreshing thing, because a lot of the software that I've used over the years, I've been practicing for 28 years now, and I've been heavily involved in software since the 1980s. But a lot of the software I've used in the legal space has just not been very good, because the software engineers didn't necessarily understand the way that we actually practice law. So anyway, glad to have all you guys with us today. Brittany's going to kind of kick us off and give everybody the rundown, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, thank you so much for that great introduction. So I'm just going to introduce us briefly. As you already know, Mike is amazing, a very successful estate planning attorney. As you mentioned, Wouter is the founder and CEO of DecisionVault, and really found, as I mentioned, from his wife's pain points, that the experience for the clients could actually be much more improved through legal technology. And I'm the head of legal innovation at Gavel. So today we're going to be diving into this topic around automating estate planning, design, and document generation with DecisionVault and Gavel, and really having Mike show us what this looks like in a live law firm environment. So when you're, thinking about your different questions, feel free to just post them in the chat as you think of them, and we'll pick them up once we conclude. We're going to go over the agenda really quickly. So Mike is going to walk us through the what and the why of automation and legal technology. So we want to really start with this idea of what is the end goal or process that we're trying to automate. I feel like that's always a really good place to start, and how can these tech tools be applied in a law firm actual environment versus somebody just hypothetically thinking and trying to solve your pain points. What does this actually look like? Then he'll go into why should we invest time and money on tech and automation, and what does this do for our firm in terms of revenue and efficiency. Then we're going to divide the how time between Wouter, Mike, and myself, where we're really going to go into like that design planning process and the client intake part and what DecisionVault can do for you there. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the seamless complex document automation you can do with Gavel. And then Mike will pick up with this idea of what can you do after that? Can you trigger other automations? What can you do to follow up with that? And then we'll pick up your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the time back over to Mike, who will pick up this question of the what and the why. So I'll stop sharing my screen so you can see Mike.
So, I talk a lot about automation. I think many of you have probably been on some of the automation workshops and things that I've done over the past few years. There's also some great training in the Lawyer Club. If you're not a member of the Lawyer Club, I recommend you join. I did a 6-week course on automation there, and there's lots of video on automation and different things. A lot of great content there in our school community. So if you haven't joined that, I recommend that you do, because there's a lot there that will help you in thinking about this. But I think the first question is kind of like, why bother with automation? Why should we invest in this, our time, our money in automation, and kind of what is it? So when I think about automation, I think about it from the context of if we were operating IBM Selectric typewriters, anybody remember those? Like I do. When I took typing in high school, we had to use an IBM Selectric to do that. Best class ever took, by the way. But if you think about it, in an estate planning firm, if we were doing estate planning for clients and we were typing all the documents up on a typewriter, it would take various drafts going back and forth. We'd have to edit, proofread very carefully. correct those errors each time and make sure that, each draft was right. And so you think about how much time that takes. We wouldn't be able to do very many plans, right? So, maybe you could do 3 or 4 plans a month, or, if you got a big clerical staff, you could turn out more, but it takes a lot of manpower to do that. And so if you think about what automation can do, is it can really speed up that process. So, we're in a spot now where I can literally create an estate plan for a client and have it ready the next day for them to sign. Now, I don't do that because I think clients start to look at that if you're able to do it that quickly and question the value proposition. But we can do that. So I can sit in a meeting with DecisionVault. I can go through the questions with my client. I can hit submit on that button. It gets automatically sent to my drafter. She's in the Philippines. She works during our nighttime. So the next morning when we come in, we have drafts ready. And we've been able to train her to hit about a 95% accuracy rate on that. So you think about that as compared to, one typewriter or 20 typewriters and how long that would take to do. That's really what automation can do for you. And so if you think about it, there's really two areas where automation is important and helpful to us. And first is in the client experience. So if, back in the old days, we had to write a letter or we had to call a client. And, every time you needed to send a client a letter about the status of their matter that you were working on, you had to sit down, somebody had to sit down and type that, or you had to dictate it. Now we can automate that communication. So as soon as, we start drafting, as soon as I hit that submit button in DecisionVault, and that goes off to my drafter, an email goes to the client and says, hey, we've started working on your drafting. We'll be in touch soon to set up a time to review everything, et cetera. So that we're able to really improve the client experience through automation. They're getting more consistent communication. They know exactly what's going on with their matter. And by the way, the biggest complaint that clients have about attorneys is they don't communicate enough. So you can use automation to do the heavy lifting on some of that communication for you. And then the second thing is obviously for the lawyer, we've already kind of covered the time savings, but it also reduces errors. Even when we were using, word processors to create documents for clients, if we were, typing those every time, most people had sort of a data bank of, documents that they used over and over again. And guess what? Anytime you cut and paste, you are greatly increasing the chances that you're going to get a name wrong, you're going to leave a clause in that you didn't mean to, et cetera. So when you use a document automation system like Gavel, you reduce that opportunity for making errors. And that ultimately leads to a better outcome for the clients. I mean, I don't want to get that call from the beneficiaries of one of my clients saying, who's this John Smith that you named in the trust or in the will? And that's really one of the things that automation can do for you, document automation specifically can do for you, is to reduce that chance that you're going to make some sort of error. And then the other thing that, when we think about automation, we can get a little bit trigger happy and say, oh, I just want to automate everything. So I think you have to put some thought into, what's appropriate to automate. Where should we maybe not automate? Where should we, stay high touch? And so one of the areas in my firm where we do that is we have a client concierge for our estate planning practice. And while someone is in the estate planning process with us, they get a call every week. And we have a person that does that. And, she calls them and just checks in and says, hey, this is what we're working on right now. This is where we are in your matter. Do you have any questions about anything? Next up is, et cetera. And what that has done for us is it has led to a huge increase in 5-star Google reviews, which we know has a direct impact on our business, because often clients will say, hey, I was, researching estate planning attorneys on the internet, but you guys had so many 5-star reviews that I knew, having you guys do my work would be fantastic. We've recently just had a client who put up a review that said, if I could give 10 stars, I would. And that kind of response comes from that high touch. So we automate the task of making those calls, but then it's a human touch there. And so you got to think about, when you think about automation, you can't just automate everything. You have to think about what's appropriate for automation. Where's a good spot for me to apply this technology? So things like that communication, that routine communication, the documents is a great place to automate. The intake piece, which Wouter's going to talk about with DecisionVault, those are all great places to automate. So if you guys, Brittany and Wouter, if y'all want to go from here, I think Wouter, you're going to talk a little bit about design planning in DecisionVault now.
So Brittany hinted at it that I built this for like my wife's practice initially, right? So DecisionVault, it helps with client intake. We single out client intake, and the reason that I initially built this, sort of the founding story, is when my wife in 2020 had a matter in her practice where a client wanted to nominate 37 beneficiaries, right? And like that, it's a great like triggering example if you have your automations going already. Like, let's see if it breaks. Well, at that time there weren't much automations. The automation was me helping out my wife Julia with like typing all that stuff over, and what that led me to ask, say, hey, like it's 2020, doesn't someone have figured out how like the client will fill in a form and information will go into like your document drafting, Wealth Counsel, Interactive Legal, Gavel, your like CRM case management, Clio? And what I found was like, no, it doesn't. Like, and it doesn't. It may do a little, but if you try 37 beneficiaries or people, like it's not going to work that way. And the reason is not that these tools don't integrate with one another. There's lots of integrations going in every direction. The reason is that the intake forms are not smart enough to gather all that information to begin with, right? So that's why we focused on that, and we made a smarter intake form that can take 100 contacts if you want to enter them. It can take all the assets, it can take all the information, and it can do that over time. The client can log back in later, add some more information, because inevitably when you sit down with them to have a meeting, 4 people will come up that were not in the initial data capture. How are you going to do intake on, like, gather the info on those 4 people? Because pretty much across the board, all of the intake forms of Clio and all these different tools, they don't work multiple times. You cannot, typically once they submit it, that's it. There's no way to open them up later and have the client add in more information later. So we're here together with Gavel. We have a great integration with Gavel. And like one logical question that people ask is like, hey, why would I like add DecisionVault with Gavel? Doesn't Gavel have these intake flows? And yes, Gavel does have intake flows. Those lead kind of directly into documents, and you can reuse that data, but it's not as intuitive to do that, to do the intake over time with the client. And the other reason to kind of put DecisionVault in the middle is to say, hey, the client will work through DecisionVault. It has this questionnaire you can all customize. And because we've singled that out, now you can like map that data, which Brittany is going to show in a moment. But because we have it in DecisionVault, now we can do other stuff with it as well. So I can build up a design sheet that I like. You could have the client fill the questionnaire, push a button, export the design sheet, print it, and walk into the client meeting. And you have your checklist to run the meeting with the client on paper or on like a screen if you're doing a virtual meeting, with all the client names folded in, etc. There's a very nice Excel sheet that comes out with all the assets of the client. DecisionVault can merge information into PowerPoint diagrams. It syncs with a growing list of case management tools, and then of course like draft platforms like Interactive Legal or Wealth Counsel if you wanted to use those. So by sitting in the middle and kind of like syncing to everyone, it's a nice way of capturing info once and then reuse and reuse and reuse that over time.
That is awesome. So thank you so much. Yeah, I think what he's really emphasizing here is that ability to reuse information that's collected one time. So you're not having to, and also engaging the client in that process of, they're the ones that know who they want to designate. So we need a place or a portal of some kind for them to log in one time, have that be their space that they put in their information. And it's our job on the back end to figure out where that information goes, whether if it's filtered and flows into Gavel, or as Wouter suggested, that it has all of these different integrations where you can kind of go off from there. So I'm going to teach you a little bit more about how Gavel fits within this equation as well. As Wouter kind of hinted, this is around this automation infrastructure for a law practice, where you're able to have this be the underlying foundation, and you can have it linked to all of these different technologies and pieces. You can link it to Zapier, where you have access to 5,000 other applications. But essentially what the core, value proposition here is that you're able to take your legal templates and turn them into workflow automations where you are able to reuse that data. But on top of that, you're also able to add as much complex logic as you'd like using our no-code word add-in and our word tagger that makes it really easy to add these different logic flows to your documents. So you can use this kind of feature called Gavel Blueprint, where you just take your document and you drop it into the system. And I'll show you what this looks like, where in this case, I just said new workflow. And what we're trying to do is turn this document where we prepare this document all the time. A lot of the information repeats, and we want to be able to just have this document something that we can just push information around from either a DecisionVault or from our own data manager within Gavel to have this information populate, and we don't have to constantly be retyping information we've already entered somewhere else. So what you do is you just take your document and you drop it into our system here. It's going to take you next to a screen that looks like this, where you're able to see that it's recognized where things repeat, and it's even recognized that borrower name has 2 instances. So it's suggesting that you might want to combine these 2 places into a single what's called variable, as I'm sure many people understand this idea that we're assigning a particular name or unique variable name to each particular question and input so that we can use them in lots of different ways. So we have the ability now to go through and say we want this to be a text variable, or we can change this to something else. So the AI feature here is just recommending the question that you might ask, either internally or client facing, in order to accept or get this input or information. You can accept or reject these suggestions. And when you're ready to draft the workflow, you just say draft workflow. And it's going to create these questions for you. So you're able to then, all you need to do is review and then see if you want to add any different logic conditions or move things around at all, completely up to you and customizable. So what we can see here is we already have the ability to just save this, run this, and the document template has already been added on the back end here. So what we can see is that it's inserted the variables that it suggested into our document without us having to learn how to code or do anything at all, other than just run this or be able to add any conditions as needed. Obviously, you would pretty this up a little bit. You can change the header, you can make your own logo be there, you can change the colors and font and customize that as you need. But what we're doing at the end of the day is turning our documents into these reusable automations. So let's give an example of what that might look like. So let's say that you are trying to prepare a uniform statutory power of attorney. In this case, I'm just going to show this example from California. And if you're, downloading this, or you have this already or whatever else, this isn't even like a fillable form, which can make it really hard. You'd have to print it out or somehow otherwise turn this into something that's usable. So in my case, I turn this into a Word document that I could then automate using Gavel. So what you can see here is that in the instructions, there are a lot of instructions with conditions. So for example, we only want certain things to show or hide depending on somebody's answer to a kind of question, right? So in this document, there's actually a lot of logic happening. We only want to show special instructions if they've actually given special instructions. We only want to show this section of the power of an attorney where more than one agent is designated if they have designated more than one agent. So there's a lot of logic going on here in the sense of, have they designated one single agent or multiple agents? And so because we have the ability to have repeating items within Gavel, you're able to put multiple and have conditions around what shows depending on their answers. So in this case, I've created a workflow that's connected to DecisionVault for the purposes of this demonstration. What you'll note as well is that you can use DecisionVault kind of on its own and integrated with lots of other systems. You can also use Gavel on its own or with a lot of different systems with other native integrations. But we're just trying to show you kind of the power of combining, different systems that could be used on their own and the power of using them together. So in this particular example, I created a demo matter here in DecisionVault where the person has already completed their questionnaire, or the client has completed a questionnaire asking them about different relationships and what they want to prepare. In my particular example, I added a section that asks them questions about their power of attorney decisions. So in this case, all I need to do is, I'll go back really quick to say, you go into your matters, you would choose which matter you want to work with. You can go under integrations here and you'll see Gavel. Once you see Gavel, you'll be able to see all of the workflows that you've created, where a workflow is that automated document that you created, and you're able to pull the fields for it. So in this case, I'm going to show you this one here, and I'm going to say pull fields. So what it's pulling and allows you to map over is all of the different questions that I've asked in that particular workflow. So we're also seeing what I have designated the answer is, or where the information is coming from in the questionnaire, or from the contact's details or the client's details or a specific person. So in this case, we're getting to pull all this information. And because I've actually run this before, it's remembering that I said this particular setup for this particular workflow. So what we can also do is just come all the way down to the end. We can actually see that the repeating item, which is meaning that, for example, in the case that Wouter suggested earlier from his wife's scenario where they had 30 beneficiaries, which is super crazy, you can collect the information relating to all of those different people using Gavel, as well as you can see here with DecisionVault. And they're able to actually have anything that's needing to be generated for those people. You can actually have them separately come out and generate as a document as well and be automated in that way, and uniquely identifying for them, for example, their name and their address and their specific information about what they receive in this particular example can be sent and sent out into different Word documents or PDF templates or whatever else. So let's go ahead and say process this template, and we just need to say results. And what we'll just do is review to make sure that all the information went where we want it to go. And here's an example where I customize what this interface looks like within Gavel from the run link standpoint. So we can see that all this information has pushed through. So we can see the client's name and address, the different choices that they made within the questionnaire regarding whether they wanted to have the power of attorney continue if they become incapacitated. So we're trying to see all of the different points and set up the different points where logic matters in the document, so that we're able to just set that up one time, and then we can run it for each different client as needed. And we can make adjustments if we want to. So we'll see different examples of this when I show you the document and how this was set up. Another one would be like whether they want to list any special instructions, whether they want to designate a single agent or more than one, as we mentioned, and then how the agents are to act if there's more than one, separately or jointly or otherwise, and then whether they'd like to limit the powers or grant all of the powers. And in this case, they want to just select specific powers here, and then we can just say continue. From here, we're going to be able to see that we didn't actually even need to put in the information for the people who were designated as agents, because that pushed through automatically from DecisionVault. And we'll be able to see all of their formatting done perfectly here. So we have the client's name here, the different people that they've designated and their addresses. We're able to see the, actually here, there's logic happening as well with agents versus just a single agent. All the different places where they have indicated they want the different agents to have powers. The special instructions is showing, and this section around separately versus jointly, and so on and so forth. You can also make it to where at the end of this workflow, when it's run, you automatically have an email sent either to the attorney or to whomever you need this to go to, saying something like, hey, attached is the power of attorney for this person. Please review and set up a signing meeting. You're able to go through and take a look at these. Yeah, here we go. Perfect. So you'll be able to see that that's attached there. You can have it sent in PDF and Word, for example, as well. Now, let's say, for example, the person had a different selection. What we're also able to see is that this information gets stored within Gavel as well as in DecisionVault. So I can actually move this information around either into the same workflow or a different workflow, depending on what you need. So if I look here in the history of how many times or who submitted this particular workflow, I can see that I just did this one here, but I can also see that I have previously run one in this scenario where it is a single agent and a different designation of what powers they can have. So you can see the differences between the logic that's happening within this document. So here, for example, I can see the person has appointed only one agent. Now we have an agent and attorney, in fact, instead of multiple. And we have all of these blank except for all of the powers listed above. And because they didn't say that they wanted more than one, we no longer have the section around how the separate agents are to act. So this is where a lot of that power in Gavel comes from, is your ability to really customize what information goes where, when it's shown, and you have the power of doing that with the word added. I just wanted to show you one quick thing before I show you that, which is the fact that you're able to also move information within Gavel to not only the same workflow with different information, but also entirely separate workflows. So let's say, for example, that I pushed information from DecisionVault into Gavel to prepare an engagement agreement, and now I want to prepare the power of attorney. Then I can push that information around, or I can take the information that I have here with a completely separate scenario, but the same client, and push that into, for example, an eligibility for a specially adapted housing grant letter in this particular case, just to show you that information moves around. So the relevant information here would be their name as well as their address. We can add any other information here, for example, and continue, review, continue, and see the result here. And also you can see that his address pushed through and we didn't have to do anything there. So all that information is going to push through here. And on this one as well, depending on their answers, there's a lot of logic going on underneath here on whether they may or may not be eligible. And this has also been emailed out automatically afterwards. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly show you in the last remaining parts of my time how you would actually go about the part of assigning what logic goes where. So if we go into our Word documents here, like this, for example, we'll be able to sign into our accounts and interact with the questions that we created directly within our own templates and Word documents. You can also automate PDFs using Gavel, both with the generative AI feature that I showed you and otherwise, but I just wanted to quickly show you how you would do this with the example of some of the logic you would see here. So as I mentioned, we have, for example, the ability to insert just straight variables. So I would highlight where I want information to go. I would choose the workflow that I want to have associated with this particular document. I can choose the variables and where they go. So in this particular example, I want to have the contact's full name first and last. I can make this standard uppercase, first little capital, or title case. I can say insert variable. And then I can also appoint the different agents depending on, we can put in the single and then have that have logic. We can put in the repeating item information and have logic around those. I just want to show you the logic piece. So let's pretend that these have, a single agent or whatever else. What I can do is I can say, show this phrase when, and then you can find the agent single or multiple variable that you created is single. You could add multiple conditions as needed. In this case, we'll just do this one here, and it's going to do all of that coding for you. So you don't have to know how to code or like whatever else in order to start using this right away. That's how I was able to also add the different sections around here. And like I said, you can add multiple conditions. So for example, if I wanted to have the variable of the client's initials, so I created a variable for this client's initials, and I only want them to show in the case that this particular one is selected, you would do that same process. You would say, show this when, and then you'd say, the limited powers options is real property transactions. And in this case, if the number of the selected items is less than 13. So you can get really granular about your conditions, and you can stack conditions, and you don't need to know how to code. You just need to know what the logic is, and that's your expertise as the lawyer, is understanding the logic of why you would include certain things in particular documents over others. So that's about my time here. So I'm just going to stop sharing there and pass the time back over to Mike.
Thanks, Brittany. That is really some powerful stuff. And one of the things about using DecisionVault and Gavel is that they both have what are called APIs. And I never am quite sure what the technical level of the audience is. So this could be, too deep, but I have found over the years that if I understand what something can do, if I understand what the possibilities are, and I know that it's possible, then I can usually figure out a way to do it. Google's my best friend. Now, ChatGPT, Claude, they're also good friends of mine. So if I know something is possible, then I'll figure out a way to do it. So one of the things about APIs is it means that you can push information back and forth the same way that you can with an integration that you see, but the integration is basically kind of taking that code piece on the back end and abstracting it away. The power of APIs is I can do things like I can trigger a workflow in Gavel without having to open up the interview and go through all those questions. So I can take information from DecisionVault and I can press a button basically, or my client can press a button. I can send that information into Gavel. I can fire off a workflow, and then I can, out of the back side of that, using the API, I can get the documents out of Gavel. So let me give you an example of one of the things that I've done with Gavel and DecisionVault. We do probate work as part of our practice. And one of the things that I observed about probate years ago was that a lot of the time, what would happen is the paralegal would come sit down with me, and we kind of go through all the information, and and then I'd say, okay, well, here's the petition we need to file. And if you think about that, that's a logic tree. There's certain questions that if they're married, then this. If they have a will, then this. If they don't have a will, then this. It's just a series of questions. And so the first iteration of this was I created an old logic tree based chatbot, pre-access to AI tools for all of us that we just kind of ask the questions, go through the data, and then it would spit out out of the other end. I think we need this petition, and that allowed me to take the client data, hand it to the paralegal, and have him or her prepare the petition without a whole lot of input from me. And then I could look at it and say, yeah, we're on the right track here, and make whatever adjustments. Well, then along comes DecisionVault, and along comes Gavel, and along comes AI. And so what we've done now is with DecisionVault, there's the capability of sending out a questionnaire multiple times. So the first time we send out a questionnaire, we ask some basic questions to set us up for that first meeting. And then if they retain us, the questionnaire goes back out to them again to gather additional data. At the end of that, when they click the button, I can see that on the back end of DecisionVault that they have resubmitted that questionnaire. And now I should have all the information I need to figure out what probate petition needs to be filed and to draft it up. We take that data, we feed that to an AI creature that I've created that can evaluate based on training that I've given it, can evaluate, what type of probate petition is needed. And then it sends the instruction to Gavel to create the document. The document's created and it pops out the other end. So that's the kind of thing that you can do with tools like Gavel and DecisionVault when you have access to an API. And it requires a little bit of knowledge, but that's an example that maybe gets your creative juices flowing, and you start thinking about, well, gosh, if you can do that, then we could do this. One of the other things that I've recently been working on is an engagement letter system that works with our CRM. So we use Go High Level for our CRM, and I don't know how many of you are on Go High Level or have experience with it, but the document capabilities in Go High Level are really poor. It's very rudimentary, and so it's not really appropriate for engagement agreements, at least not in my practice, because like, we have so many variations. We might have a married couple, we might have a single couple, we might be doing a will, we might be doing a trust, we might be doing privet, all those different things. So what we've done is we've created a system where you basically tell it what kind of engagement agreement you need and Go High Level. So my team can do that. And then that information is pushed into Gavel, and we have a logic built into the workflow. So it goes, okay, well, these things are true, then this is the engagement agreement we need, and here are the clauses that need to go in that. That is assembled, and then it pops out the other end. That's sent via Slack to my team, and a copy is dropped into Go High Level. And then if they need to do DocuSign, there's a way to do that as well. So that's another example. The other thing you can do is, like, when those documents are drafted through Gavel, you can send out an email. You can use Zapier. I have found that the webhooks work better than the Zapier integration, but you can send a webhook to Zapier to say, hey, these documents are completed, and you can send out whatever kind of email you want. So if you want a fancy HTML email, or you want to just send a text email, whatever you want to do, or an SMS message to your client, say, hey, we've got your drafts ready, give us a call to schedule a time. Or you can send them a link to schedule a time
I've got to go to the bathroom. Sorry.
Okay.
No
You can schedule it. You can send them a scheduling link to schedule a time to come in and sign. You can also update your system. So one of the things we do for our case management, we use Locus. So when each step is completed like this, a note's dropped into Locus to say the documents have been drafted. Here's where they are. So those are all great things that you can do. You can also, send letters to your client. There's an API for snail mail that I think there's several of them now, but I've always used lob.com, and you can basically create HTML templates for letters that would go out to your client, and you can automate the process of sending those letters. So, when those drafts are ready, if you wanted to, you could print the drafts out, send them in a letter to your client for them to review. All of those things are possible using systems like Gavel and DecisionVault. So I think, Brittany, if we want to just kind of open things up for questions at this point.
Yeah, perfect timing.
Yeah, we can you can drop them in the chat, or if somebody wants to come on and ask a question, that'd be cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mike. So I have a couple of questions we can address that were in the chat, but we can kind of share them with everyone. One of the ones is that I know that he was saying that I know that I was trying to pack in a lot of stuff and asked me to slow down a little bit. So I apologize that I went super lightning fast. I completely recognize that. So I just wanted to share that I will be sending out the recording where you'll be able to pause and like go back and all of that. It's hard to condense everything I want to say into 10 minutes, but I completely get that. If you also want to just email me at Brittany, BRITTANY @gavel.io, I'm happy to set up a one-to-one time and we can talk together about your particular setup. So just wanted to point that out. Somebody else asked whether there's, a Gavel Academy or some sort of training with videos available. I just answered that we have a robust learning center. So I gave the link in the chat. It's help.gavel.io. And I also have courses through my own academy that I set up before I started working full-time with Gavel, where you can get some free courses and some paid courses. Michelle also said that I lost her. I apologize. So I can set up some time with people outside of that. There was a question around Wealth Counsel. So Michelle asked, I use Wealth Counsel. How do you use Gavel if you have that? So I was just mentioning that Wealth Counsel, and Mike actually can speak to this as well. But essentially, Wealth Counsel has their free forms. What Gavel allows you to do is to automate your own bespoke forms within your own Word and PDF templates. And then Wouter also said that some of DecisionVault's users use Wealth Counsel for trust, and then they run ancillary documents and some state-specific documents through Gavel. So I hope that's helpful as well. Do you want to speak to that, Mike?
Yeah, so I use Wealth Docs as well. That doesn't mean that Gavel's not a useful tool to me also. One thing I would point out that's different about Wealth Docs and Gavel is their APIs. Here we go again. But the sort of problem, okay, so my dream is to have the clients enter data, the attorney to interface with that data and add to that whatever the attorney. So the client inputs all this data. We say, yeah, we want to do a living trust, and here's the trustee and da 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 da. And then we press a button and the documents come out of the other end. It makes absolutely no sense to me that we have to have a human being between me and the software. All they're doing is re-entering data into the drafting. So even if you're doing it yourself, you've already sat down, you've talked with the client, you've made decisions about this, you've recorded it in some way. You could be writing it down, but we could ultimately turn that into I take an iPad into my meeting and I record, what we're going to do in terms of the drafting. I've created a design sheet in DecisionVault, which is really easy to do. And then, so that's my, sort of editing my addition to that data. And then I want that to turn into documents coming out of the other end. Well, that's not possible with Wealth Docs. And the reason it's not possible is because all they will let you do is pull over the contacts, unless you tell me something's changed. But all you can do is pull over the contact information. So all the information you have on assets and who's different beneficiaries and how you want things set up, you can't pull that into Wealth Docs. So you have to have a human sitting between your design process and the drafts. With Gavel, all that information you can pull in. Now you have to create the documents yourself. You have to bring your own documents, but anything you want to bring in from DecisionVault, you can bring into Gavel and use to for conditional logic, et cetera. So it comes much closer to sort of what my dream is of ultimately, being able to get some of those intermediaries out of the process. So that, to me, that process really, it brings it down to the client and me. They're giving me the information. I'm giving them the legal advice and helping them to design the plan. And then the plan's coming out the other end. And I don't have a paralegal or a legal assistant or a drafter or anybody else in between me and the draft documents. So that's kind of what I've seen is a big difference between the way that Wealth Docs interoperates with DecisionVault as opposed to Gavel. Both useful tools at this point, though.
Yeah, I don't think they will, it's just this a level of complexity issue, right, Mike? So what you would like to do, if they were to try and encapsulate that in a way that DecisionVault can hook into and will work for everyone in all 50 states, the complexity just explodes. So that's not going to happen. So it's kind of do you want to update your own forms, or do you want to have it all automated and have them, or have them keep the trust updated? And that's where my the answer I gave in the chat is that we have some users who use Wealth Counsel for the trusts and then do some of their own documents. And then maybe they have those built out in Gavel, and every now and then they run them out of Wealth Counsel to kind of see if things have changed, right? If they have made certain improvements or changes. One thing about the new Wealth Counsel intake, Wealth Counsel released functionality to do intake. It's not very usable probably for this group if you're into automation and connecting things together, because it only can talk to Wealth Counsel. You cannot customize it at all, and it can only be filled one time, right? So the client can fill it in. Mostly it's focused on the contacts, and they did a pretty nice job there. But then the moment you hit submit, there's no editing of any of that information the moment the client hits submit. And then it doesn't sync to anywhere else. It just goes into Wealth Counsel. So it's a little bit more of, I would view it as sort of a beginner tool. People can start with that, and then once you want to do more with automation, you can plug in DecisionVault, plug in Gavel, and start tying all your different tools together.
Yeah. Definitely. I appreciate that. So there are a couple of questions in the chat as well. Andrew asked whether there was a URL for a Lawyer Club. So I provided that within the chat. If you want to check that out, it's on School, so you can join for free. Michelle asked Mike specifically, do you just use Wealth Counsel for the trust then and use Gavel for the ancillary documents?
That's not our current process. I can see the value in that, and that may be something that we do in the near future. I just had a lot of balls in the air and hadn't had time to do that. But I use Gavel. One of the things that Gavel allows you to do is to build legal products. So one of the things that we did was built what we call a college readiness kit. You know, the competition for this would be like Mama Bear. There's others out there, but these are, you know, lawyer drafted documents specifically for people in Georgia. And so we created a set of documents for college kids, and we sell that for $249, I think. And it's fully automated. So they come to a landing page, they fill out the questionnaire that Gavel generates, and then those documents are created and they're dropped into a Google Drive folder, and an email goes to my staff that says, call this person and schedule their signing meeting. You know, they bought the college readiness kit. So that's one of the things that you can do with Gavel. That's pretty powerful. And there's some other people that have done much more interesting things than that with Gavel and building legal products. But so I do use it for probate. We have in Georgia, we have statutory, well, they're not statutory, but we have official forms for probate. So we've taken the ones that we use most commonly and turned those into Gavel workflows, and that works really great. I think personally, I think the ancillaries makes a lot of sense, because when you use Wealth Docs to create ancillary documents, you always have to go to a separate place to enter that information. And if you could push that straight from DecisionVault and have those created and dropped into the client file in your case management system, and then you just do the trust, that'd be a good, maybe I'll spend some time on that next. But I think that's great. Yeah.
Especially with like, so in DecisionVault, you have the client questionnaire, but then you mentioned it already, you have the design sheet. So on the design sheet, you could think of that as like an attorney only section to the questionnaire. You can embed questions and answers from the questionnaire in there, so you can see those as you go along, but you can assign like these contexts. We've done like an inventory of these contexts that are in a person's life. So you can, the tool can let you build on that and then assign like who are going to be people in certain roles, number 1, number 2, and number 3. And that info, that list, if you use Wealth Counsel, you have to go select those people. You can sync the context, but you have to build up the list from a dropdown. But if you're using Gavel, all of those roles in the specific slots can go over. So you can get that extra automation push there.
Yeah, absolutely. Super helpful answers so far. Anne asked, I want to be able to use DecisionVault information to create Word documents such as letters or etc. What's the best way to do that? So that's kind of where that combination of DecisionVault and Gavel really works well together, because you can have all of that information stored within DecisionVault, and then you have that mapped over to how you've set this up within your Word documents for your letters. And then all you have to do is what kind of I showed during the demonstration, where you just say like, I think it says like process documents or whatever. And then that's going to push all of that information or put it from, you know, where it was collected within DecisionVault into the letter within the Gavel workflow automation. So that is kind of a good use case for using these two tools together. We have and then did you want to add anything about it?
No, that's okay. Correct. And
yeah.
then obviously if it depends a little bit on what other tools you're using, right? So you might have some extra options. Like I did some videos recently on like the highly, it's very limited, but if you're really just looking to like merge some names into a form letter, then you could do that probably with the tooling that's in your case management tool, depending on which one you're using. So that might be an option to kind of get started with this, but that you'll quickly run into the limits of like it's really just put a name into a field. Like there's no conditional logic, or it would be really hard to plug that in. So that might be an option. I'm seeing the next one.
Yeah.
Can the attorney export variable names and inputs collected by DecisionVault in spreadsheets or database format? So there are some ways that you can like export the info from DecisionVault. So if I have a matter, I can have like the financial sheet is a nice looking version, right? So it has formatting on here. So this is kind of hard. Like this is helpful because you don't have to go build this, and it looks nice, and like immediately the clients will appreciate this. But if you just wanted to have access to the info, then you can just export the assets to a CSV and the context to a CSV. Right now, we don't have a way to export questions and answers, just because like again, everybody can customize this. Like the complexity goes through the wind, through the roof. But like we do have the context here. So this is the assets, and then we have the context as well. It's just a CSV export. So you could potentially do something with that if you wanted to.
While you're there, Wouter, Laura asked a question about how long is your client intake form for estate planning? She asked specifically in Gavel, but I think since we're kind of doing this together, and that's kind of where, you know, we want to highlight here for DecisionVault is if you wanted to open the questionnaire, maybe show how that, like what that would look like to the client. She's just asking, like, do you include all questions regarding contacts, goals, and financial assets? Do you split them up into multiple intake forms so it's not overwhelming to the client? Are they okay with long questionnaires, which they can save and come back to? So if you want to speak to that piece with this.
Sure. So it's kind of what Mike suggested, saying like, hey, when he said we send one part out and we send one part out later, it's really that you can kind of split this up. So on each of these buttons here, some are green, some are blue, on these sections, you can say whether they're always visible or whether they are only visible after the questionnaire has been submitted once. So you can like hold some back and then ask a couple, client hits submit, they close this out. They might have a meeting with you or have some kind of interaction. Then when they open it again, now the rest will show up, but it's still one questionnaire, one collection set of information. And then like, so we don't really want to split that up into like, you can send them another questionnaire, but then they kind of start from the top again with like, hey, who are you? And like, who are your kids? So that doesn't really work very well. It's better to view this as we do estate planning. And maybe if we do like probate because there's a death in the family, then that's a whole new sort of project with that client. But like 3 different steps in the process should all kind of fit into the same questionnaire. And I've seen people do rather long questionnaires in here, but it doesn't really feel that long for the client because this initial section kind of hides a lot of the length of it. What else is there? Oh, and then one thing about that came to mind with the interaction with Gavel, like when the client is never really going to see like the Gavel side, right? One of the implementation consultants, what I see them do is like they kind of built up one giant long page in Gavel with all the questions that DecisionVault is pushing, because then you can just push it over from DecisionVault, click through that screen, and then you don't have to go through like 15 screens in Gavel and have 15 clicks every time, right? So like that's one thing that I've seen people do.
I actually have a question, Wouter, as well, and maybe for Mike as well, which is because I haven't played with it too much, but there's, you know, Gavel's on Zapier as well as DecisionVault. So I'm curious if you've played with, or other people have also played with, some of the other things that you can do, you know, to trigger different actions in Zapier.
Yeah, I've used it a lot. So I use a tool called Flowwise to build AI workflows, and I'll take data from DecisionVault and push that into a series of prompts, AI prompts, and so it can use it. We scrub the data. We make sure that, you know, there's nothing. Just to be clear, you have to be careful about not sharing confidential client information with the our tech overlords. But but then so I can feed that information from DecisionVault straight into an AI workflow and do different things depending on what I need. But yeah, I found that Zapier works really well with DecisionVault. I will acknowledge that Zapier is sometimes problematic with Gavel. But I have found that if you use the webhooks as opposed to using the Zapier integration, then generally that hasn't given me any problems. So yeah, that's the way around that. And something Wouter was talking about earlier about the breaking up the questionnaire. I just wanted to touch on that. So the way we think of that in our practice is, I don't want to give anybody an impediment to coming in and hiring us. So I don't ask them a whole lot up front. And once they hire us, then we ask them, okay, now we want to know everything. Plus, if you think about it, a lot of our clients now are finding us on Google and they don't know us. And, if I send them a questionnaire, say, tell me about all of your bank accounts. I want to know, about every single bank account you have. They can get a little creeped out by that. That's what we used to do. So I know they get creeped out by that. So breaking it up like that. So initially we're just asking kind of questions about, family, how many kids do you have? Are you married? That sort of demographic information. And that gives us sort of a direction to go in the conversation. But, we call our first meeting a discovery and fit meeting. We're trying to discover information about you and you discover about us and find if we're a good fit to work together. So that's how we look at that meeting. And this is a topic for another day, but I have non-attorneys who do those meetings. So we're not really doing any work for the client until they hire us. So I don't need all that, financial information until they've decided to write us a check. So that's our take on that.
Yeah. I built software API integrations for a living, so I find it hard to deal with Zapier. So I just off of what you might find use in it, like not everything that we gather from clients in DecisionVault is available through our API / Zapier, right? So the answers to, like, you can get the contact, you can get the assets, you can get limited information on the matter, like how many children are there, and there's a couple of other variables there. But all those extra questions you ask the client to write, that's not in Zapier for like complexity reasons. We might add it in the future, but it's not on our API, hence it's not in Zapier. And then also the specific mapping, right? So like, I think the Gavel integration is one of our most complex, just because like we built the initial one for sort of sending fields, but then we extended it to support the repeating objects, right? So in Gavel, you can like build all these fields saying child 1 first name, child 1 last name, child 1 address. However, you can also build up an object for a child, and a child has a first name, a child has a last name, a child has an address. And then DecisionVault supports that. So here in the setup of the Gavel integration DecisionVault, I can pull for a given workflow, and it will look for the repeatable objects where I can have, okay, first name, middle name, last name. I can map these to a field in DecisionVault for that contact. And then when I run the Gavel integration, let's see if I have it on here. Oh, that's nice. When I run it for Gavel, then it will, at the bottom, will have the repeatable items. And I can either say, I'm going to send the clients, or I'm going to send the children, or I'm going to link it to one of these other, a manual selection of contacts, or just roles from the design sheet. So like this stuff would be like immensely painful to do in Zapier, and actually it wouldn't work because like you can pull contacts, but then that's not sort of linked. So like this works a little nicer, but then it wouldn't allow you to do what Mike's doing in some of his use cases to like do the automatic apps.
Right. So since we're at time, I'm just going ahead and put our information up on the screen. So if you'd like to reach out to each of us individually, you can. So you can reach me at Brittany at Gavel.io. You can learn more about Gavel at Gavel.io. you can reach out to Mike. His email is here, and then Wouter as well. You can learn more at decisionvault.com. So we're so happy and excited that you all were here. Thank you all for coming. And then if you want to stay on, Mike, you said you usually stay on a little bit longer. I just wanted to give people who need to go now the time to go.
Yeah, so I got a couple of minutes if anybody has questions, and just to also tell you guys that the estate planning mastermind, we meet every other week at 1:30 Eastern time, almost every other week. Sometimes I have other stuff going on, but we'd love to have you guys join us. Brittany put a link in the chat to our school community. You can go there. We're on the calendar. There's a Zoom link. You're welcome to come anytime you want. Sometimes we do things like today. Other times we might just have a conversation, and I might just go around the room and say, hey, what are challenges you guys are facing? And we kind of talk through problems and stuff like that. So I'd love to have you guys join us in the future.